Hi everybody, this is Mr. Manning once again, and this video is going to be about buying a car. So maybe some of you have already done this. Maybe you've already purchased your first vehicle. And if you have, while you're watching this video, you can maybe think a little bit about what your experience was like, and maybe think about, if you would have done it any differently or not. But if you haven't bought a car yet, it's actually a really important part of becoming an adult is purchasing your first car. Buying a car is actually one of the most expensive items that you will ever purchase. In fact, it's probably the second most expensive item that you'll ever purchase, maybe besides a house. So it's important to get it right. And as you become an adult, you'll probably purchase several cars, but it's not something you do all the time. You usually buy a car maybe like every 3, 4, 5 years, maybe even longer than that. Um, it's not the most pleasant of experiences sometimes, but it's definitely important to know what you're doing when you do it. So let's talk a little bit about buying a car. In the video about renting an apartment, I mentioned that the good rule of thumb for renting an apartment is that you should spend about 30% of your net income on your rent. Well, there's also a rule of thumb for your car. People should usually spend about 15 to 20% of their net income on what we call their transportation budget. And the transportation budget is actually going to include several different things. It's going to include your car payment, gasoline, maintenance, those kinds of things. So we'll talk a little bit more about those here in a little bit. Like I already said, this is going to be the second largest purchase you'll make in your life for a lot of people. And a lot of times people kind of, make mistakes whenever they're purchasing a car. They find one that they really like because maybe they really like the appearance of it or its color, or maybe they're on the lot and the salesperson talks them into something that they're not really wanting. So you have to be kind of careful, and you have to, sort of know what you're looking for before you even go to the dealership. All right, the process. So there's kind of like this 6-step process to buying a car. Um, Step one, determine what you need. What kind of car do you need? And notice I'm saying need and not want. You might want a Ferrari, you might want a Mustang convertible, but do you really need one of those? Probably not. Step two, determine how much you can afford. So we said 15 to 20% of your net income. Step three, do some research, and luckily with the internet, it is super easy to do research about cars. Step four, compare some options. You're going to narrow it down to maybe 3 or 4 cars that you can afford and that you like, and maybe compare them with each other. Step five is to actually go to the dealership and do some negotiating. Hopefully you can maybe get some money taken off of the price. And step six is to pull the trigger and actually buy the car. So let's talk about these steps in a little bit more detail. All right, so step one, determine your needs. So here are some questions to ask yourself. When you're going to be using this car, how many people are going to be in the car with you? Is it just you? Are you the only person that's going to be driving around most of the time? If so, then you probably can get a nice little tiny small car that gets really good gas mileage, right? However, if you are married and you have a spouse and you have 4 children, you probably can't get away with that Mustang convertible. You're probably going to need something larger like a van or an SUV. How often are you going to use this car? Are you going to be driving it a lot? Is gas mileage going to be super important? Or is this going to be a car where you just drive it around town and maybe you put like, 50 miles a week on it or something like that? And then do you need it for any particular purpose? So a lot of times people need like a car that they can haul things with, so they look for a truck. Or if they have a lot of children and they're hauling them around, maybe they need a van. Or if they live in an area that gets a lot of snow and ice, maybe they need a 4-wheel vehicle. So you just think about like what purpose your car is going to have. All right, once you determine your needs, you figure out how much you can afford. This is done the exact same way you did for your apartment. You're going to look at your net income for the month, and you are going to find about 15 to 20% of that net income. So here's an example. Let's say that we have a person that makes about $2,000 a month, and we want to find out what 20% of their net income is. We would multiply 2,000 by 20%, and that would tell us that they could afford about $400 on their transportation. Now, super important. Remember that transportation includes all of these things listed right here. It's not just the price of the car. That's part of it, and probably a big chunk of it actually, but it's also going to include the insurance on the car, which is required, gasoline, and routine maintenance like oil changes and replacing the tires and those kinds of things. So when you're figuring out how much you can afford, don't just look at it and be like, oh, I can get a car that's $400 a month, because that'd be a pretty nice car, right? But then you forget about all the other things that go into it, and then you're short on money every month. So don't do that. All right, step 3. So you know what kind of car you need, and you know how much you can afford. It's time to start doing some research. It's time to start looking at what cars are out there available that fit your needs and fit your budget. And I would recommend, narrowing it down to like maybe 3 or 4 that you think you like. And then you can start comparing them with each other. And then maybe you want to go take like a test drive with them and actually go to the dealership and talk to one of the salespeople, and maybe talk to people that own that car and see if they like it or not. I've listed several websites here. There are tons of websites available for you when you're trying to do some car comparison shopping. All right, speaking of comparison shopping, step 4 is to compare the cars that you think fit your budget and fit your needs. What are some things that you need to look at? So gas mileage is an important one. I put fuel efficiency right here. That's a pretty important one, because that's going to reduce the cost of your gas if it has really good gas mileage. Maybe you want it to be a newer car, so you want a model that's only a couple years old or newer. Power and performance. Do you care what kind of engine it has, or how fast it goes, how many horsepower? Comfort and convenience. Do you want it to have like the latest gadgets? Does it need to have leather seats, and does it need to have like satellite radio and all that kind of stuff? Warranty. So how long is it going to be under warranty? How long if anything happens to it, the dealership will fix. Most cars have about a 60,000 mile warranty. Some even go up to a 100,000 mile warranty. It just kind of depends. Newer cars even have sometimes less than that, like 36,000. So you definitely want to talk about or find that out. Safety. Does it have really good safety features, airbags, anti-lock brakes, those things? Do you want a new or a used car, or are you going to lease it or buy it? And these last two we're going to talk more in detail about, so I'm not going to spend time on them right now. In fact, here we go. New versus used. Okay, so a lot of times when people are looking for their first car, they have a problem deciding, what they want to do. So first of all, advantages for buying a new vehicle. It's not pre-owned. You're the only person that's ever owned that car, so you don't have to worry about if anybody else messed it up in any kind of way. It's going to have a manufacturer's warranty. There's going to be a really wide selection because it's new, so there's going to be all sorts of different color options, and you're going to be able to customize it a little bit better. Used vehicles, so the biggest advantage is they cost less money. You don't have that initial depreciation like a new car does. And speaking of depreciation, they depreciate slower, because for most cars, when they depreciate, they actually do it the very first year. They depreciate the most. So speaking of depreciation, maybe you don't know what that term means. Let's talk a little bit about that. Depreciation basically means that the value of the car slowly goes down as it becomes older and as it is used longer. But there's this kind of weird thing that happens. New cars actually depreciate the fastest at the very beginning of their life. So a new car actually depreciates up to 30% within the first 2 years. So that means if you buy a car for $10,000, over the first year it's going to lose about $3,000 of value. So you'll only be able to turn around and resell that car for maybe about $7,000. Used cars don't depreciate as fast because they've already been through that first year of depreciation, so they have a much slower depreciation. So that would be one thing to consider whenever you're getting ready to buy a car and you're trying to decide if you want to buy a new or a used car, is try to figure out, am I going to resell this quickly, or is this going to be a car that I'm going to drive for 10 years? If it's going to be a car you're going to drive for 10 years, then a new car would probably be a good way to go because depreciation is not going to matter to you. But if it's a car that you want to drive for 1 or 2 years and then you're going to turn around and sell it, then a used car is probably a better option financially. Okay, leasing versus buying. So maybe you know somebody that leases a car, or maybe you've at least heard commercials for it. Leasing a car is basically like renting a car, but you do it for a long period of time, usually about 3 to 4 years. And what happens is when you lease a car, you agree to pay a monthly payment, but after so many months, the dealership wants the car back. Now there are options where you can choose to go ahead and buy it at that time for a discounted price. But if you are somebody that wants to change cars often, then leasing a car can sometimes be a good option for you. However, like I was saying earlier, if you're somebody that's going to drive the same car for a long time, 5, 7, 10 years, then buying's actually a better option financially, because once you pay the car off, once you pay the loan that you had on the car, that car is yours, you own it. And then when you resell it, you get the full amount of money for whoever you sold it to. If you lease a car, you pay monthly payments on it just like you would when you buy it. But the problem is after 3 or 4 years, you got to give that car back. And since you never actually purchased it, you don't get any money in return. So long story short, leasing is good if you want to trade cars often. Buying is better if you're going to drive the car for a long period of time. Okay, step 5, negotiating. All right. So when you go and buy a car, you're going to negotiate, or you should. The price that's on the vehicle is not the final price. You want to negotiate with the people at the dealership, try to get money taken off the car, maybe try to get more features added into the car, maybe get a longer warranty. Maybe you just want to get a lower percentage rate on your loan. There's all different things that you can negotiate. And you should do that until you feel comfortable with the deal you're getting. It is not the worst thing in the world to walk away. In fact, that's a good negotiating strategy. Whenever you go to look at cars, be willing to walk away. Because the dealership, they definitely want to sell you a car. I mean, that's how they make money, right? So when you're in there negotiating, if you tell them that you're going to leave, they're not going to like that a whole lot, and they might be willing to negotiate a little bit better. All right, finally, you've negotiated, you've found the car that you like, you're ready to do the deal, you're finally going to purchase the vehicle. All right. It's a good idea to put a down payment down on the vehicle. A down payment is just an amount that you give to the dealership whenever you purchase the car. It just can reduce your monthly payments. Some dealerships require a certain percentage down. 20% is a good rule of thumb to have, but if you are unable to do that, there are loans that you can do. Another thing that some people that buy cars kind of forget about is you are going to have to pay taxes on the vehicle. There's sales tax. So make sure that you have the money for that, because especially if you buy a new vehicle that's maybe $15,000 or $20,000, the sales tax alone can be about $1,000, and the government's going to require you to pay that within a month of you buying the car. So if you don't have that $1,000, then you're not going to be able to get your car licensed, and you'll actually be driving it illegally. So make sure you have that in your budget as well. All right, I put on here secure financing. You're going to have to probably get a loan. You might choose to get a loan through the dealership. A lot of times that's a good way to go, except for they might have higher percentage rates. My wife and I actually, whenever we get ready to buy a car, we usually like to have the loan already set up. So we usually contact our bank and let them know that we're getting ready to purchase a vehicle, and we fill out all the paperwork for the loan and get all of that approved, so that whenever we go and buy the vehicle itself, there's no worry about how we're going to get the loan or where the money's going to come from. Okay? All right, guys, hope you enjoyed this video.